Every night while you sleep, your brain runs a built in cleaning cycle that most people never think about. It helps clear out proteins that have been linked to memory loss, slower thinking, and conditions like Alzheimer's disease. And most people never notice when that system starts to shut down. It does not feel dramatic, which is why most people never notice when it starts to change. It happens quietly, and sometimes all it takes is the wrong evening routine or no routine at all to interfere with it. And that's enough to interfere with the process your brain depends on every night. Here's a more natural, spoken version without that written feel. What makes this different is pretty simple. This isn't just theory, and it's not some fringe idea. Back in October 2024, researchers at Oregon Health and Science University actually used live imaging during brain surgery. And for the first time in real human subjects, they saw clear evidence that the brain has its own waste clearing system. That system is what we now call the glymphatic system. And it really comes down to one thing: deep restorative sleep. The kind of sleep most people over 60 are no longer getting enough of. So let me ask you something. Do you wake up feeling foggy? Do names slip more easily than they used to? Do you lose your train of thought halfway through a sentence? Or just feel like your mind isn't as sharp anymore? Most people look at that and say, that's just aging. But that's not what the science shows. Even in your 70s and 80s, the brain still has the capacity to repair, reset, and clean itself, but only if the conditions are there. And one of the most overlooked windows for that is the 30 to 60 minutes before you go to sleep. What you drink during that window actually matters, not because of trends or marketing, but because of how your body works. There are certain natural compounds that can help shape the hormonal conditions your brain needs to drop into deep sleep. They can also ease the kind of low grade inflammation that gets in the way of memory processing while supporting the system your brain uses to clear waste overnight. That's where we're going to focus. 3 drinks, each one grounded in research and each one working through a different biological pathway, helping regulate cortisol rhythm, supporting melatonin production, reducing neuroinflammation, and improving the nightly cleanup process your brain depends on. If you want to understand how your brain actually maintains itself over time, subscribe now, because once you see what's happening in that short window before sleep, you don't look at your evening the same way again. That window before sleep starts to matter even more when you look at what's actually driving all of this. There are a few core pieces underneath it. Your brain has a built-in cleaning system, but it only switches on during deep sleep. And a lot of older adults aren't reaching that stage consistently anymore. Cortisol, your stress hormone, becomes one of the biggest disruptors of that process, and certain plant compounds can help bring it back into a more natural rhythm. Melatonin production drops sharply after 60, but there are specific foods that can support that cycle instead of letting it drift. At the same time, low-grade inflammation keeps building in the background, slowly affecting memory and focus, and what you consume at night can work against that while you're asleep. The system itself also depends on hydration and key nutrients, and by bedtime, most people are already slightly dehydrated without realizing it. And then there's timing. Roughly 30 to 60 minutes before sleep, that window shows up again, and it matters just as much as what you actually drink. Because underneath all of this, there's a very physical process happening. Think of your brain like a city that's active all day: signals firing, chemicals moving, cells doing their work. And as that keeps going, waste starts to build. Proteins that have done their job, fragments from normal cellular activity, compounds that over time are now linked to plaques and tangles seen in Alzheimer's disease. By the end of the day, that system is carrying a load. There has to be a way to clear it. And there is. Running alongside the brain's blood vessels is a network of channels where cerebrospinal fluid moves through slowly, almost like a steady current, carrying waste out and into the body's broader clearance pathways. That's the glymphatic system. But it's not running at full speed all the time. During the day, while you're awake, that flow stays pretty low, Research published in Current Opinion and Physiology shows it really ramps up during deep natural sleep. That's when movement increases and the actual clearing gets done. The deeper the sleep, the more efficiently this system works. But when sleep gets lighter or more fragmented, which tends to happen with age, with stress, with hormonal shifts, that whole process starts to slow down. Less gets cleared, and over time, you begin to notice it. Waste starts to build up, amyloid can accumulate, and inflammation gradually rises. Memory isn't as reliable, and thinking just feels slower. That sense of fog people often attribute to aging doesn't just appear randomly. In many cases, it lines up with a system that isn't clearing the way it used to, and that part is not fixed in place. A 2024 clinical study released as a preprint on medRxiv using a randomized crossover design showed that during sleep, this system actively moves Alzheimer's related markers, including amyloid beta and tau, out of the brain and into the bloodstream. That process is happening overnight. When sleep reaches the right depth, the brain is literally moving those proteins out. Every night becomes an opportunity for that kind of cleanup. The limitation is not the system itself. It's really about whether the conditions are there for it to run. And one of the biggest shifts with age is how much time the brain actually spends in slow wave sleep, stage 3 NREM. That's the phase where glymphatic activity is at its peak, and it's also where memory consolidation happens, where everything from your day gets organized and stored. So, when that stage gets shorter or harder to reach, it's not just about feeling a little more tired the next day. It starts to affect how clearly you think and how well you remember things, and how efficiently your brain resets for the next day. At that point, it's not just about how long you sleep, it's about the quality of that sleep. And that becomes one of the central pieces in how the brain holds up over time. And this is where it starts to connect back to what you can actually do with it. If you're new here, welcome to BioBytes. This is where we take real health science and turn it into something you can actually use in daily life. There's a growing community here, people paying attention to how their body changes over time and doing something about it. If that's you, subscribe now and turn on the bell so you don't miss what we're building. And I'm curious, where are you watching from today? Drop your city or your country in the comments. We've got people here from all over the world across 6 continents, and it's always interesting to see where this reaches. Because once you understand what's happening at night, small things start to matter more than they seem. One of those factors is what you drink before bed. And one option has been right there the whole time, hiding in plain sight. Tart cherry juice, but not the sweetened kind and not anything flavored. Specifically, Montmorency tart cherry juice made from Prunus cereus. There's real data behind it. In a controlled clinical study with older adults dealing with insomnia, the group drinking tart cherry juice actually slept longer, up to 84 extra minutes compared to placebo. Sleep efficiency improved as well, going from around 77% to about 84%. And these weren't just people saying they felt better. These were objective measurements. And it comes down to what's inside those cherries. They naturally contain melatonin, one of the few food sources that provides it in amounts that actually matter. They also carry tryptophan, which feeds into the pathway your brain uses to produce both serotonin and melatonin on its own. And then there are anthocyanins, the compounds that give tart cherries their deep red color. Those act inside the brain as anti-inflammatory and antioxidant agents. All of that becomes more relevant with age because melatonin doesn't stay constant. Between your 20s and your 70s, production can drop by 70 to 80%. The pineal gland starts to slow down. As melatonin drops, the internal rhythm that regulates sleep begins to drift. Sleep gets lighter, more fragmented, and that shift carries through the night. Less time in deeper stages, less glymphatic activity, and more waste left behind by morning. Over time, that whole sequence starts to add up. Tart cherry juice works right along that chain, and there's broader evidence behind it too. A systematic review published in 2025 looked at 7 interventional studies on tart cherry intake, and across those, sleep duration improved, sleep efficiency improved, and even the time it takes to fall asleep got shorter. And in 3 of those studies, the changes showed up clearly in objective sleep measurements. This isn't anecdotal, it's consistent across multiple trials. And the way it's used is straightforward. About 8 ounces of pure, unsweetened Montmorency tart cherry juice taken roughly 30 to 45 minutes before bed. Or if you prefer something more concentrated, 2 tablespoons of tart cherry concentrate mixed into water can give a similar effect. If blood sugar is something you're tracking or you're managing glucose levels, it's worth checking in with your physician because it does contain natural sugars. But for most older adults, this is a simple food based way to support the signaling your brain relies on to reach deeper sleep. And that same idea carries into something that works along a different pathway. A drink that's been around for a long time, but is now being looked at in a very different way: golden milk. It's simple. Warm milk, either dairy or plant based, combined with turmeric, a small amount of black pepper, and sometimes ginger, cinnamon, and a touch of honey. What matters inside that mix is curcumin. It's one of the most studied natural compounds when it comes to brain health and inflammation. And it behaves a little differently from most things you take in because it can actually cross the blood-brain barrier, something most substances never manage to do. Curcumin does. And once it's there, it starts working directly inside brain tissue. If you think of your brain cells as delicate components, always active, always processing, then ongoing inflammation acts like background interference. Not enough to shut things down right away, but enough to wear things down over time, slowly, year after year. Curcumin steps in along that process. It helps dial down inflammatory signaling, reduce oxidative stress, and support the structure of the cells themselves, and there's solid data behind those effects. A randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial published in the American Journal of Geriatric Psychiatry followed adults without dementia. Those taking a bioavailable form of curcumin showed about a 28% improvement in memory test performance over 18 months. The placebo group didn't show that change. And it went further than that. The group taking curcumin also showed lower accumulation of amyloid plaques and tau tangles, the same proteins tied to the progression of Alzheimer's disease. So this isn't just about feeling sharper. It's not just about perception. There are measurable differences at the structural level, changes in the kinds of buildup that are typically associated with cognitive decline. That's the level this is operating on. And that effect doesn't stop at protection. It also connects directly to how your body transitions into sleep. Warm milk, whether it's dairy or a fortified plant-based option, brings in tryptophan and casein. Casein breaks down slowly. And as it does, it sends a mild, calming signal through the brain. Tryptophan moves along its usual pathway, becoming serotonin, then melatonin. So you're not just adding something from the outside, you're supporting the pathway your body already uses. When ginger and cinnamon are part of that mix, there's an added layer. Both contribute to lowering inflammatory activity. Cinnamon, in particular, has been studied for how it interacts with certain brain proteins involved in long-term degeneration. And there's one detail here that changes how all of this works. Black pepper. It's not optional. On its own, curcumin is actually hard for the body to absorb. That's been shown pretty clearly. But piperine, the active compound in black pepper, can increase that absorption dramatically up to 2,000%. That's the difference between something that barely registers and something that actually reaches a meaningful level in the body. It doesn't take much, just a small pinch, but it changes the outcome completely. Putting this together is straightforward. Warm up about a cup of milk, add half a teaspoon of turmeric, a quarter teaspoon of cinnamon, a little grated ginger, or just a pinch if you're using powder, and then that tiny pinch of black pepper. If you want, you can add a bit of raw honey. About 30 to 45 minutes before bed works well. The warmth alone starts nudging your nervous system toward a more relaxed state. And at the same time, curcumin is working in the background at the cellular level. It also supports BDNF, brain derived neurotrophic factor, which plays a role in how neurons survive and grow. And this isn't about a one time effect. Used consistently at night, it builds over time, becoming a steady input that helps support the structure your brain depends on. And the pattern shifts again when you look at what's keeping many people from ever reaching that deeper stage in the first place. Because even if melatonin is supported and inflammation is reduced, there's another factor that can override both: elevated cortisol. While tart cherry juice works along the melatonin pathway and golden milk helps reduce inflammatory pressure, this third approach focuses on what's holding the system in a more alert state. Cortisol is your body's main stress hormone. It's produced by the adrenal glands and follows a daily rhythm, rising in the morning to help you wake up, stay alert, and get moving, then gradually tapering off as the day goes on. By night, it should be at its lowest point. That drop is what lets the body settle into deeper sleep. This pattern is known as the cortisol awakening response, and it's one of the core pieces of your sleep wake cycle. But that rhythm doesn't always hold. In many older adults, it starts to shift. Stress builds over time: physical discomfort, isolation, financial pressure, and instead of dropping in the evening, cortisol stays elevated, and that changes everything downstream. When cortisol stays high at night, melatonin gets suppressed. The nervous system remains slightly on edge, and the brain has a harder time transitioning into slow wave sleep, which means the glymphatic system, the one responsible for clearing waste, doesn't run the way it's supposed to. That disruption isn't minor, it affects the entire process. And there's data showing this can be shifted. A randomized controlled trial published in 2024 Inches, the journal Nutrients, looked at adults experiencing chronic stress. Those taking a standardized ashwagandha root extract showed clear reductions in serum cortisol levels. Their stress response profile improved in measurable ways, and that pattern shows up across multiple studies. In older adults, including those between 65 and 80, ashwagandha has been associated with better sleep quality, clearer mental alertness in the morning, improved overall quality of life scores. A more recent 12-week trial in individuals with mild cognitive impairment showed improvements in both working memory and general memory with standardized ashwagandha extract. And part of how it works comes down to its active compounds, the withanolides. They interact with GABA receptors in the brain. GABA acts as the system's braking mechanism. When that signaling is strong, the nervous system quiets down. Muscle tension eases, racing thoughts slow, and the body can shift towards sleep more naturally. And that's where the second layer comes in. Chamomile works along a similar pathway, but not in exactly the same way. Its main compound, apigenin, binds to GABA A receptors in the brain. That interaction creates a gentle, calming effect. It's been used for generations as a sleep aid, and modern research has clarified how it actually works at the receptor level. When you bring chamomile together with ashwagandha, the effect becomes layered. You're not just addressing one pathway, you're influencing both the stress hormone pattern and the signaling that helps the nervous system settle down. And that combination lines up directly with the pattern many people experience: lying in bed, feeling tired, but unable to switch off, waking up in the middle of the night, around 2 or 3 in the morning, with thoughts that won't slow down. That pattern points back to cortisol staying elevated. The system is still in an active state when it should be winding down. And even though it's common, it's not fixed. It's something that can be influenced. The way this is used stays very simple. 1 chamomile tea bag, or about 1 teaspoon of dried chamomile flowers, steeped in 8 ounces of hot water for 5 to 7 minutes. then about half a teaspoon of ashwagandha root powder, or you can open a capsule, usually in the range of 400 to 600 milligrams of a standardized extract like KSM 66, and mix that into the tea. If you want a small amount of raw honey can be added, taken roughly 30 to 60 minutes before bed. The warmth itself starts to shift the body toward a more relaxed state. At the same time, apigenin and the compounds from ashwagandha begin working along those GABA pathways and cortisol patterns. So, what you're getting isn't just a feeling of relaxation, it's a response grounded in how those systems operate, delivered in something as simple as a cup of tea. And when you put all three together, the pattern becomes clearer. The system itself needs a few things to work properly. Deep, slow wave sleep, enough fluid moving through the brain, which depends on hydration and a lower level of inflammation, so those cleanup pathways don't get overloaded. Each of these drinks lines up with one of those needs. Tart cherry juice helps nudge the body into deeper sleep through melatonin and tryptophan. Golden milk works on the inflammatory side, supporting the structures the brain is trying to maintain. And the combination of ashwagandha and chamomile helps quiet the stress response, making it easier to shift out of that alert state and into deeper sleep. They're not meant to be mixed together. They're part of a routine, something consistent, something you use intentionally in that window before bed. Timing still matters. About 30 to 60 minutes before sleep, that same window shows up again. Hydration matters too. Just earlier in the day, so by evening, there's enough fluid available for the system to move what it needs to. Position can play a role as well. Sleeping on your side has been linked with more efficient flow compared to lying flat on your back. And light exposure matters. Cutting down blue light from screens and overhead lighting helps preserve the melatonin signal the first two drinks are supporting. All of this works together, and it builds over time. None of this is instant. These are inputs. Used consistently, they start to shift how the system behaves. Curcumin builds gradually, ashwagandha's effect on cortisol adds up over time, and improvements in sleep from tart cherry have been observed after about 2 weeks in controlled studies, with further changes continuing beyond that. So the approach stays simple. Pick one of the three, just one. Prepare it, use it, and stay consistent for 2 weeks. Then notice what's different in the morning, how clear your thinking feels, and how rested you actually are. Whether names come back more easily, whether you stay focused longer through the day, your body responds to what you give it. The real question is whether you give it enough time to show you. When you step back and look at the bigger picture, it shifts a bit. The brain isn't just passively declining, it's active, working every night to repair, organize, and clear out what it no longer needs. That system is already there, and only recently has research started to show how structured and coordinated it really is. What matters is whether the conditions are there for it to run the way it's supposed to. And that's something you can start influencing right away. One step at a time, one input at a time, gradually shaping how the system responds. The first option is simple. About 8 ounces of pure Montmorency tart cherry juice taken 30 to 45 minutes before sleep, helping restore melatonin signaling and supporting deeper, more efficient rest. The second builds around golden milk. Warm milk combined with turmeric, black pepper, and ginger, delivering curcumin into the brain, lowering inflammatory pressure, and supporting the structures that need to hold up over time. The third focuses on the stress response. Ashwagandha with chamomile tea, calming cortisol, working through GABA pathways, and creating the conditions where the brain can actually shift into deeper stages of sleep. These aren't shortcuts, and they're not quick fixes. They're inputs that work with the biology already in place. And the research around them keeps pointing in the same direction, supporting memory, supporting clarity, supporting how the brain holds up over time. Getting older doesn't automatically mean losing that. That kind of decline isn't as fixed as people tend to think. What happens in that quiet stretch before sleep, that space between being awake and drifting off, carries more weight than most people realize. That's where the direction starts to get set. That's where the setup happens. And what you do in that window matters. If this helped you see it a bit more clearly, take a second to like the video. It helps more people find this kind of information. And if you want to stay connected to how this actually works day to day, subscribe now. If someone in your life is dealing with sleep issues or starting to notice changes in memory, share this with them. It's the kind of information most people don't come across until much later. I'll see you in the next one.